If you understand the unit's AI in TFT, you pretty much understand all of positioning, and it's not that hard. Instead of learning how to position every new set, there's like rules that pretty much carry over every set and don't need to be relearned if you understand the mechanics behind it. So the first like half is like how the AI works, and then the second half is how the philosophy behind why you position in certain ways, and lastly, it's going to be set specific stuff. For instance, Renata Glass, you want to put behind your tanks and like kind of stack them like this sometimes. But that's something specific to this set and something you have to read for. But this is like the last 10%, and if you just know the first 90%, every set should be a lot easier to understand, and it should be a lot dizzying for you to learn every new set. So without further ado, let's get into the first part, and that's going to be AI. So the way targeting works in TFT is when the fight starts, every unit, based on their range, will target the closest unit to them. So if I have a Zyra here and I have three Amumus like this, it's a little laggy, who will Zyra target? Pretty clear for me. I think it's the Amumu is the closest, so it's going to be Amumu. If it's going to be something like this, where it's a let's say Aurelia is targeting, the fight starts, and it's a 50-50 between it's a equal range, then it's a 50-50 between what Aurelia targets. Occasionally, I don't know if it's present in this set. The 50-50 can be broken by unit size, like model size, because there's two things in TFT. There's hex range, like clearly that Zyra is like 1, 2, 3 hexes away from Aurelia, and or is that two hexes? That's two hexes, and there's real life range. So like, um, even though she's equally far from Zyra in terms of hexes, obviously the range is a lot shorter here than it is here. So uh, model size can sometimes play into question, and that's important when you have a unit like Vi who will stun a unit, right? So she grabs the target and stuns them for about 1.5 seconds, taking them out of commission. So if you really want to prevent their enemy Elise from casting, you want to position a Vi like this. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let's go back to the targeting thing. So closest unit, and once this unit dies, the next second rule of the AI is after their target disappears, they will retarget the next closest unit. So that's going to be the next move right here. So the reason this is important is because you need to understand what this means for your melee carries. So melee positioning is something the biggest issue I see in newer players. Understanding melee positioning is, I think, one of the hardest things to grasp for newer players, even like players in your masters. And I see this constantly, where they put like unit that should not be in the front line, right? Like they have ergots next to their sentinels. So we'll talk about two main things here, but the first thing is there are frontline carries or frontline units, and there's backline units, right? So Zyra and Draven, both backline units, and all these three units here are all frontline units. But not all frontline units are built the same. So Urgot does nothing in his ability to make himself tankier, nor does he have traits that help with that. So he's essentially a backline carry, just with a smaller range and a bit more armor and MR, of course. But Aurelia and Singed, they both have a frontline trait, which is Sentinels, that makes them tankier, and an ability that makes them tankier as well. So he has damage reduction, and Aurelia has a shield. That's the difference between a first row and a second row. Occasionally, like if you have a strong enough unit, you can put them in the second row like that, or front row like this. But generally, you don't want to put them on the outside, like we mentioned before, right? So if we have a Vi on our board and they have an enemy Caitlyn, I guess, who is Caitlyn going to target first? Your Vi, right? And if your Vi has all your items and Vi is taken out first, there goes all your damage. You could have an insane front line, but the moment this Vi dies, you lose the fight because you have no damage anymore. So you always want to position her safely. And as we talked about, when this Aurelia dies, Caitlyn should what? Target the next closest unit, right? And that's often going to be this Vi, or the next unit that's here, because this unit has to walk up, right? So if we kind of play that scenario out, let's say we have Vi here, Vi goes up, this unit dies, Caitlyn is still targeting Aurelia, and Aurelia will finally die, and then she has to target Vi next. So what's important to do is have your strongest tank on the outside when playing around melee carries, or at least your strongest tank that can be targeted first. So if I have like a Lavi 2 with let's say like a Warmogs, that is your shield against Vi being targeted. So think of you're adding Alawi's HP on top of Vi here, because this Vi is essentially immortal until this Alawi is taken out. Because when the fight starts, Caitlyn targets Alawi, and she cannot pivot off and switch targets to Vi unless this Alawi dies first. One of the worst things you can do is like put a really weak unit here. This Singe dies immediately, and then this Violet gets targeted next. You might as well just do this, because if you're playing around a backline carry, so for instance, if you're playing something like your normal academy board where you're playing Corki plus like Heimer, you want to make sure all your damage is located in one spot for burst carries like Corki, because if Corki doesn't kill a unit with with one cast, he kind of doesn't do great, because he does so much damage that unit pretty much is guaranteed to cast the target he's attacking. So like this Elise. So he really wants to burst units down. And that kind of leads into my third point about where you position units, because a unit's value, like I'd say a good 60% of their value is in their cast. It depends on the unit, right? Elise's cast is very important to her. If she doesn't cast, there's almost like no reason to have Elise on this board, right? Because she's just in there for the trade at that point. Let's say you have like Swain and a Bruiser. If this unit doesn't cast, all she's in there for is like for your front line to get tankier. Like her stun is so important, and if she dies before she casts, she gets invalidated. So you want to like make sure your stronger tanks that will cast are on the outside, right? Same example, if you have a Singed 1, Kaelin's gonna kill Singe before he casts. So and Singe cast is actually very strong. So make sure you have that as well. And if you're playing a backline carry, you kind of want your main tank to be in the middle, because you're not really playing a melee, right? So you don't really care as much if who gets targeted first, because they can't target your backline until your front line's dead. So putting your front line in the middle just kind of prevents some lopsided stuff from happening. Like if you are playing your 4 Sentinels here, and Sentinel Aurelia, and let's say they're positioned like this, right? Let's say Heimerdinger is your main carry, very weak units here. So they die, and they just walk into the backline and kill your Heimer without your Alawi staying alive. So the name of the game is just keeping your main damage alive, whether that be frontline or backline. Backline, prevent them from wrapping you, and frontline, prevent your melee from being targeted. So that's essentially the fundamentals of how AI targeting works, and what the philosophy behind positioning is. So let's talk about some more specific examples real quickly. I won't go over all of them because there's just way too much, but let's talk about some of the item ones. I think getting redemption, full value in redemption, is sometimes bait, because if you have like a really tanky unit on the outside and you're surrounding it by 2 shitters, you're actually getting a weaker front line by not putting your unit on the outside. Like sure, you're gonna have, let's say, like full redemption value here, but if this Aurelia dies immediately because she's targeted first, like you actually didn't get any redemption value here, right? You might as well just do this, make sure Alawi's targeted first, or your strongest tank, and then you actually keep these units alive longer. Now, having said that, I think for Alawi specifically, you want to put her not on the outside, because Alawi's second cast is very important. So she's a unit that scales over the fight. Her first cast gains HP from herself and steals it, and if she gets her second cast off, she does that again, which is very important. That can be the difference between a fight, and I think just getting your Alawi to cast twice can be a huge benefit to your climb. Similarly, Elise, her targeting is kind of vague. She jumps to a nearby hex. When they're very vague like that, it usually just means like nearest hex, nearest or biggest clump nearest Elise within like 2 hexes. So just position Elise on the same side. If she's 1-starred and she's gonna die immediately, try to put her like this, and make sure she's like near enough to jump. For gargoyles, it's great early on, but it's not that great later on, because you don't want to be positioned like this, right? If you ask me what the specific benchmarks are to when you go from solo frontline to like this frontline, I can't give you a actual stage number because there's too much nuance to it. But like you should kind of understand like when, by watching your fights, like when it's like, okay, at this point I should just like put this units like this and not greed but frontline, right? So take that with what you will. Gargoyles, either way, is not a strong item. You only do it when you can do this early on. This is when it gets most value. So making a stone plate later on isn't the best move. Speaking of units that want to kind of hit a lot of or get a lot of ramping up, Mundo is a big one, especially when he gets Dominators. But even without Dominators, he does scale over time because he gets a second heal off. And he also, the longer he stays alive, the more kills he gets and the more permanent HP he gains. So Mundo is also someone you want to keep not on the outside like this, where he can get targeted first. But it can be kind of tricky to do, especially because he's an experiment unit and he is at mercy of where the laboratory hexes are. So keep that in mind. And moving on to the next one, I think Garen is a unit that really benefits by positioning something like this. So like, I'm just using any frontline units here. I think if you like sometimes position like this and you clump all the way like this, you kind of lose a lot of or you take too much damage against like AoE, right? But if you do something like this, and this goes for like not just Garen but other frontline, you kind of spread the AoE away, right? So what's a good unit to use? I think like, I don't know, for instance like Caitlyn or anyone that does AoE damage. This will hit like around here and kind of avoid this entire clump. This is especially nice if you are doing Garen and playing like 4 Emissary and you have like Invessa getting the HP. This prevents like the Invessa being damaged first, right? So you just do something like this to kind of avoid the damage. Just be careful because sometimes spreading your front line in the corners can get melee comps to wrap into your back line. That's pretty much all there is to positioning. I think with that knowledge, you can easily climb to like GM with that knowledge, and I think pretty much everything else is like self-explanatory based on what you read. This is knowledge that will carry with you every set, so I think that's what I like to focus on. And I'm sure there's guides out there for like specific comps. If you want to learn Renata, those guides should come with like positioning tech as well. So if you guys have any other questions about fundamentals, feel free to reach out to me and ask in the Discord or just leave a comment. We do free coaching every weekend, so join the Discord for that. And subscribe or follow if you guys enjoyed this video. I'll see you guys in the next one.